Welcome to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. This is our weekly venture into the world of small to medium-sized businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives success.
So our goal here is to help you grow and to be the best you can be, both in business and personally. To do that, we identify and we discuss topics that will hopefully help you as you work to build a successful business.
We also interview business owners and executives. It's our hope that you may be able to gain insight on ways to help you be a better leader and provide a better culture for your people.
Our mission here is to help you pull the chute once a week to work on your business instead of always working in your business.
So we hope you find these discussions insightful, helpful, and useful.
And thanks for your support. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome everyone to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. As always, we are so excited that you are here with us today. Jana, how are things down in Nashville? I know you guys have had some rough weather.
Yeah, we had a wild night, 4 different tornadoes about 5 miles east of where I am. Or west. So yeah.
You're down in Franklin, which many of our listeners know where that's at. So yeah, that's kind of scary. I just got the alert for up in Gallatin where I used to live. They got severe with some stuff now. So yeah, so we're just kind of praying for all you guys to make sure that nobody gets injured and all that. So but good. I'm glad that you're safe and I'm glad that you're doing well. I know you're a little tired, but other than that, it's all good. So hey, Jana, we have an amazing guest today because it's like one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. We got Oscar Trimboli with us. He's calling in from Australia. So if you want to know the future, it's Friday morning for him. We're recording this on Thursday afternoon. So Oscar, first of all, welcome to the show.
G'day. Looking forward to listening to your questions.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So, Oscar, we're going to ask you to give a little brief background, but Oscar really focuses on how to listen. And I got to tell you, it is one of the biggest struggles most people have. And so I'm very excited to have this conversation today and for our listeners to really hopefully gain some insight on what the advantages are and how to listen. So Oscar, before we get going, do me a favor, just because you always do it better. Our people always want to know who you are and how you got to where you're at today. So give us a brief background of that, and then we'll kind of jump into things.
Yeah. If you zoom into April 2008, I'm in a boardroom in Sydney, Australia. It's a video conference between Sydney, Seattle, and Singapore. We're setting the annual budget for Microsoft. And 20 minutes into the meeting, my vice president, my boss sitting directly across me in the room, in the boardroom table, says, "Oscar, we need to talk straight after this meeting."
That's all we hear.
The only thing going through my mind is, how many weeks of salary have I got left, and who are the 5 people I need to call, because this is not going to turn out good.
Yeah, right.
The meeting finishes a little early. I try and step out of the room with everybody else as they're leaving, and Tracy says, "Oscar, what I have to say is really important. Please close the door." So as I start to step back after closing the door, Tracy says to me, "Oscar, you have no idea what you did at the 20-minute mark, do you?" And I thought, wow, I'm getting fired and I don't even know why. I sat down. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Oscar, if you could code how you listen, you could change the world." What I heard was, "Woohoo, I still got a job." So for leaders out there, when you're speaking, what you say and what they hear are 2 completely different things. And for many of us, we're not sure when we say something what the other person's heard. So as a speaker, listening is just as important. In that profound moment of insight from Tracy, hopefully a decade down the track with 3 books and jigsaw puzzle games and online assessments and 35,000 people in our research database, we're continuing to code not how I listen, but how the best listeners in the world do it.
Oh, it's so fascinating to me, Oscar, because I'm a communication guru. This is my passion, starting from being an entertainer for the first, 15 years, and then moving into the professional realm and how people communicate. I talk about in my book the different styles of communication and how people then listen or absorb that information. So and Jeff and I talk about this all the time in our coaching. Listening is just as important as speaking or giving or, dialoguing. So give us some insight. Tell us your 3 top sort of high level things that you can tell our listeners about how to listen.
Yeah, well, good listeners listen to what's said, and great listeners notice what's not said. And when you know the 3 numbers of listening, you'll completely change the way you approach not just your listening, but also your speaking. So let's go through the 3 numbers that matter. This is the neuroscience of communication. From the speaker's perspective, I speak at 125 to 150 words a minute, yet I can think on average at 900. Let me say that slightly differently. The first thing I say is 14% of what I think and what I mean. Let me say that another way. 86% of what somebody says goes unlistened if all you do is actively listen to the first thing they say. Now, unless you've got a movie script and you've done a great rehearsal, which most of us don't in the workplace, and all the work I do and all our research is bounded by English-speaking workplaces, most people struggle to express what they think and what they mean the very first time. And when they feel heard, they feel seen, heard, and valued, and I'll give you discretionary effort. So the first number to remember is 900 words per minute is everybody's thinking speed. Now, in complex, collaborative, competitive environments, that can get up to 1600 words per minute. So that number drops. You get 5% of what they're thinking.
Wow.
So that's the speaker's perspective. Before we go to the listener's perspective, I'm curious, when you hear those 2 numbers, what does that mean for both of you?
Well, for me, I think it says, my opinion about that is, like you had qualified in the book, Jeff and I were talking about this a little bit before we jumped on. The first 20% of what somebody says is not really what they're wanting to say, or what the bulk of the meaning of what they're trying to communicate is about. So that 14%, first thing I say is 14% of what I'm thinking, your listener isn't really getting what you are trying to communicate, because that's not at the initial start of what you're saying or what you're talking about. What do you think, Jeff?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. One of the struggles I always run against here is, if you could just say what you mean, we could, work through this stuff. But everyone's always like, they have to preface this and they got to adjust that and make sure they set the table properly and all this other stuff. But that ability to process 900 words per minute. My daughter talks at about 1600 words per minute. So apparently that's why I miss a third of what she says. I mean, she talks so fast sometimes. She's from Chicago, and she talks so fast. I've had one lady go, I know words are coming out of your mouth right now, but I can't pick out any of them because you're going so fast.
Yeah, I've been accused of that too. You too, Jeff.
So when I moved south for a while, I slowed down. So that was good.
So tell us then, Oscar. Yeah, tell us.
Then let's move to the listener's perspective. Now, the thing to remember about any communication is a simultaneous equation, meaning you're listening and speaking at exactly the same time, no matter what position you're in, and it changes. So from a listener's perspective, you can listen 4 times faster than what they can speak. How do we know this? Some of you may be cheating already and listening to this podcast at 2 times speed. Some of you may be listening to your audiobooks at 2.5 times speed.
Right.
We know blind people can listen even faster. So what happens is, and it's happening for you right now, hello, welcome back. You're getting distracted, you're drifting, you're solving, you're anticipating, you're jumping ahead 3 steps. You know where the speaker's going. You've heard this show before. Unfortunately, you're like a doctor who's giving a prescription to a problem they don't actually have, because you're not just listening to what they say. You need to step your game up and start to listen to what they haven't said, as well as how they're saying it. So I want to give you 3 really simple tips to think about to be present when it comes to listening. What do you do when those drifting anticipation thoughts come into your mind? First thing is, how are they saying it? Are they talking about the past, the present, or the future? Are they talking about a problem or a solution? Are they talking about themselves individually, or are they talking about the group, the system, the organization they're part of? So noticing as much as how somebody says it as well as what they say. Now, with those three numbers, most people go, wow, you've blown my brain, Oscar. That's enough for today. Just the knowledge of that will start to change the way I think about silence. Because silent and listen have exactly the same letters, and I don't think it's coincidental. In the West, we have a negative association with silence. It's awkward. It's a pregnant pause. It's a deafening silence. Yet in high context cultures, people who value the relationship as well as the conversation, silence is a sign of wisdom, respect, and authority. Jeff, how comfortable are you with silence?
It's funny. I've gotten more comfortable with it. I have one client that does those, as you said, pregnant pauses in his, he's talking about things. And I've learned from him to just be silent, right? And just to let him process, because that's what he's doing. He's processing how he wants to say what he wants to say. And so, when we first started, I kept going. I mean, I was uncomfortable with silence at first, but as I got used to him, it's actually taught me to be a better listener now, because I don't need to jump right in because we have 10 seconds of silence. I just let it go. And it doesn't bother me a bit anymore. And I've used that with other people now, and it's really increased the conversation. It's weird. It's like, it's uncomfortable, but sometimes it's not. It's just like you just get kind of used to it. So that's where I'm at now. Jana, how about you?
And here's the way I feel about it, because I've written about this in my book. A lot of times in keynotes, one of the things that the ears get very used to in hearing speech and hearing pitch variation, hearing tempo variation, and hearing volume variation when you're giving a keynote is, if you do not put pauses in, the brain does not remember or record what's gone on. So what I tell a lot of my professional speakers is, when you have something important to say, you must at least give 3 to 5 seconds of space around it so that the brain absorbs it. And what happens to the ears and the brain is they go, oh, there's a little pause there. This must be more important than the dialogue before it or the dialogue after it. So these pauses are used in acting techniques. We've been using them for years in showbiz, in singing and acting. So I do teach this a lot in my coaching for professional speaking. You have to have pauses. The brain needs a rest from all that information that it's intaking. So I absolutely love pauses, but you're so right, Oscar. It is uncomfortable. People are terrified in the West. I assume you're talking about the US. We're uncomfortable when there's not noise going on, because we're so used to so much noise in our world,
Yes, and if we're leaders, we create the container in which communication takes place. So as a leader, how comfortable are you with a pause? How comfortable are you with silence being extended a little bit longer? Because silence is a tuning fork to help the speaker discover what they think and what they mean. Your job as a listener is not actually to understand what the speaker is saying.
What is it?
I love the way you just filled the silence that I deliberately let for that
I know, I saw
point to be made. Your job as a speaker, your job as the listener is to help the speaker understand what they think. It's your job to get them to move their communication from a state of this is what I'm saying to this is what I know to be true for me. This is really important. We know when people do this, their head will tilt in a different way. Their breath will shift. Their body state will change. They will say words like, Jeff, now that I actually think about it, what I mean to say is, now that I think about it a little longer, what's really important to me is people will give you these code words if you listen. If your head is in your cell phone, if you're watching your connected watch, If you've got a tablet in front of you, if you're distracted by notifications, you're going to miss all these beautiful code words that people are giving you.
Wow.
Now, as important as silence is, let me give you a commercial break from an alternative point of view. Interrupting is as important in listening as speaking is. Done well, skillful, professional interruption will help the speaker as much as an extended period of silence. Have you ever been talking to somebody where they're saying the same thing slightly differently, but they're stuck? They're going around in a circle and they're repeating this over and over again. Skillful professional interruption means don't interrupt them mid-thought, don't interrupt them mid-breath. People will forgive your interruption if you have permission, yet most of us don't. So before I give you the hack for the permission slip, Jana, you jumped in earlier on when I made the point about interrupting. What's your perspective on interruption and communication?
Well, I think I have used that technique with people that do sort of talk in the same, make the same point, but they keep saying it in a different way. And it makes me crazy because, again, I think quickly because I'm a communicator and I've studied it and researched it. And Jeff what's great about Jeff is he'll bust me sometimes when we're with clients and say, Jan, don't interrupt because that's teaching us something about the client. We had a client like that, and after the meeting, he pulled me out and said, but it was making me crazy because she was continuing to say the same thing all different ways. So I think so to answer this in the short of it, I believe that clever interruption can be necessary to move the dialogue forward if somebody is stuck as the speaker and you are the listener and you understand that that's going on. But otherwise, I don't think it's cool. And I have worked very hard at not interrupting because I've been famous for it. Because again, I'm a fast thinker and a fast talker. So I always want to move it forward.
Yeah. And listening at work is not therapy. A lot of people confuse listening with something they've seen in the movies or Netflix or some couch, some person stroking their chin with extended periods of silence. That's not what we're talking about here. Listening in the workplace has a purpose, yet most of us don't establish that purpose in the conversation. If you have this listening compass, you get a permission slip and a directional finder for everybody in the conversation, but most of us don't actually have the compass or the permission slip to interrupt. So if you can practice simply saying, what will make this a good conversation? This is an important setting of the direction of the conversation. Now, notice I didn't say, what will make it a good conversation for you? No. We're not interested in what will make it a good conversation for them. Why? Because if there's two people in a conversation, there are three entities present. You, them, and the conversation. Now, the same is true in a group meeting. Now, if you don't ask this question, it's very difficult to get permission to skillfully and professionally interrupt. So if I say, Jeff, what will make this a good conversation? Jeff says, hey, Oscar, make sure our audience is educated and entertained. Please don't have lots of silence in there because we're just going to edit it out. And all of a sudden, I know what will make it a good conversation. And I would also add anything on there. This is not the agenda of a meeting. No. This is the how of communication. So every 15 minutes, imagine it's a 1-hour meeting and there's only two of us. 15 minutes in, I go, Jeff, how's the conversation tracking? And Jeff tells me it's on track, it's off track, it's whatever. And it's also a skillful way to interrupt. Jeff, at the beginning of the conversation, you said, it's very important you use Jeff's words, this will make it a good conversation, how are we tracking? And they'll self-correct.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good. So that's what we talk about, Jeff, when we say mimic and ask back. Do you understand when I say blah, blah, blah? Like, let's say you're speaking to a team. You're a sales manager and you're speaking to a team, Oscar, and you say, did you understand what I just said? And you repeat that, and then you wait, you pause, and they repeat it back to you. Sometimes they repeat it exactly, but sometimes they paraphrase in their own language. So is that another technique that you think works, or?
People will describe what they hear very differently if you phrase it the way you have. And another approach that helps move and shift the person from hearing, knowing, to doing. So what we want to do, and I'm picking the sales manager context as an example, how would you describe that to a prospect? How would you describe that to a customer? When we describe something to a third person, we communicate very differently than if we paraphrase back what the manager just said in that scenario we talked about. So the way we want to notice what they heard, and particularly in selling situations, you would ask towards the end of the meeting, not at the end, last 40% of the meeting, ask this question. I'm curious if you would explain our conversation to the chief financial officer or to the business owner or to the CEO. How would you describe the last 30 minutes in a sentence? And they go, well, I think your offering is interesting. Well, guess what? You have a problem. As opposed to, look, I think your offering helps to solve our problem and we'll put it forward. There'll obviously be other competitors, but it definitely solves our problem. Now, you're asking exactly the same question, but all of a sudden you realize what they've actually heard. In the first situation, you got some selling to do. In the second situation, you just might have to tweak the proposal cover page or something like that. So inviting somebody to describe what they've heard from you from the perspective of an application or a third person, you're going to get closer to what it means for them rather than what they say.
What it's solving for them, right?
Yeah.
Like what it's solving.
Yeah. So there was a big aha. Did we notice that? Something just shifted. What's just shifted for Jana?
Well, I think for me, it comes more from a position of I'm a service to you. I'm wanting to help you solve this problem as a salesperson rather than I'm selling you something. How can I help you solve your problem rather than how can you buy what I'm selling? Right?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, I'm curious what the aha meant for you more than what it means for me at the end of the day, because the ahas, honestly, they're for all of us listening. We can't necessarily see the three of us in a conversation, so I'm trying to create a little visual for everyone to go there. Now Jeff's been very deliberate. He's been very focused in his listening. I'm curious how you'd summarize the last 5 minutes, Jeff.
Well, that's a great question because I think that that ability to give permission, to ask for permission, I should say, not give permission, but in a sense, you're giving it as well. If you're especially if you're the listener or the speaker, excuse me. But I think that overall, our ability to be silent when we need to be silent, to allow people to talk is an important factor. And then the ability to check in and making sure that we're hearing what we're hearing is another thing. Like you said, is the conversation going the way you want to? I like to, when I do that, sometimes what I like to do is tell people and say, I just want to make sure that I heard what you said and paraphrase back to them. Is this what I heard? And I think when I do that, it helps people, know that I'm listening. So they start to trust me as a person. And really it allows me to then make sure that what I'm hearing is what they're saying is at the same time. So it's kind of a double piece for me. And that's what I like to be able to do.
Yeah, one of the things we reinforce is when we're paraphrasing, it's not our interpretation of what they said. Paraphrasing is a neutral mirror back to them of their own words. The trust will be much higher if you mirror back their words than if you do your interpretive dance of what they just said. And they go, okay, now they're making it about them rather than about me. So sometimes the most important paraphrase is just pick one powerful adjective out of what they say. So they may say, this always happens to me. Well, you don't want to say this always happens to you. That's actually not really productive, because guess what? They're going to go in that spiral of doom. You just say to them, always.
Yeah. Love that.
Or they might say, never. It never happens to me. So what you're coding yourself into here is listen for the absolute words. So absolutes just always and never. We've got a long list of them in the book as well. When you hear these absolute code words, what the speaker is signaling to you is the edge of their thinking. They're struggling to express the idea and they can't come up with alternatives. If you give them the always or the never as an example of absolutes, they're going to pause at that point. Typically, they'll laugh and they go, oh, all right, I didn't mean always.
Right.
And yet they're then exploring what are the alternative scenarios they haven't considered. Now, you haven't asked some fancy pants sophisticated question. All you've done is mirror back the always, the never.
I love it.
Okay, so I have a question, Oscar. How did you get into this? I know that you prefaced this, or we started this discussion with what happened to you at Microsoft, but what compelled you to do this kind of research and really study this and dig into this listening idea? Because I think it's interesting. You've done lots of research, obviously.
Yeah, over 150 episodes on this show, and I'm the third person who's coming on talking about listening, which mirrors perfectly Google search for listening training versus speaking training. The percentage is so low. The difference between hearing and listening is taking action. And to be honest, because I zoned out in that budget meeting, I actually ended up getting revenue on my budget line that I didn't anticipate. And 2 weeks later, this chief financial officer came to me and said, Oscar, could you come and audit my listening in the team meeting? I said, oh, Brian, you've been talking to Tracy about this listening caper. I haven't got time for that. I've got an uplift on my growth line of 32%. I was anticipating 16. I haven't got time for that. He goes, look, Oscar, I can't fix your top line. And then he said the magic words for anybody who's ever had a quota. We can strategically invest for growth, though. Ding, ding. Brian, what time do you want me at that meeting?
Yes.
Right.
So 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at the back of Brian's meeting. He's got about 8 people in the meeting, and I'm starting to write down what I'm noticing about his listening. He's asking 3 questions at once. He's jumping in. He's only hearing from 2 of the 12 people in the room. And I look at my pad that I'm writing all this information down going, oh my goodness, I'm actually coding how to listen. Fast forward, I just got very curious. I started to study the academic literature. I started to study the practitioners' literature. And Tracy said to me, you should go and study this. Now, if you want to wind back in the room, when I went, woohoo, I hadn't lost my job. Here's what I blurted out to Tracy. I said to Tracy, do you mean code? Or code. That's how articulate I was in that moment of profound insight from Tracy. And she says, Oscar, we work at Microsoft. I mean code, meaning make it into software. And in my mind, I couldn't imagine how that's possible. A decade down the track, we're doing it. That's fairly easy. Why did it matter? If I look back on my career before that point, there were always signals that the way I thought about communication was very different. So our team meetings were always held at the contact center, not in our regular team room. You had to go on and log into the contact center for an hour and listen to customer problems. You didn't have to solve them, you just had to hear them. And we would spend the beginning of our meetings just discussing, what did you hear? What does this mean for your work? Slowly, I got a reputation in the Microsoft partner community. There's about 14,000 organizations that sold the product in Australia, representing about 250,000 employees. People would ask me to, hey, can you come and do that little talk you gave on listening? Can you come and do a workshop with us about? And people always go to me, why did you leave Microsoft? And I go, I never left Microsoft. I went towards my quest for 100 million deep listeners in the workplace. So, you know, that's how it moved from a boardroom meeting to the practice where we are today.
Oh,
Wow.
awesome. Love it, love it, love it. Hey, we got to start winding things up here, but Oscar, I have one more question, and I just want to get your opinion on this. I was working with a sales guy one time, and he was probably closing 2 deals a month for this firm, it was a law firm, and they hired me to kind of come in and help fix them because they wanted 2 deals a week, right? And so they recorded all of his sales calls. They had all this special software that would earmark when he talked about things, everything else, right? And here's the one thing I noticed, and I feel like this is an important piece of, you know, that we want to talk about. Listen, he was listening, but he got so excited about, as they were telling him about their problems, that he knew the solution. So he would not let them finish what they were talking about. He would jump in and start to talk over them and kind of go through all that stuff. And I got him to actually just listen, take notes, and then come back and say, okay, here's what I heard you say. Boom, 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 boom. Now let me tell you how we can do it. And I think that's an important piece that's missing. By the way, his sales went up to 4 a week when he started doing that, right? Because people trusted that they were listening to him now, right? Or he was listening to them. But I think that's really important as we're listening, that we actually listen. And I know we get excited that we want to offer ideas, but give me your thoughts, and how do you help people figure that out?
Yeah, so in that sales situation, nobody will buy from you until they trust that you can describe the problem better than they can.
Mm.
I like that.
So it's got nothing to do with what you offer. My biggest source of referrals is a chief technology officer out of Singapore who's never bought a product from me. He described a problem to me about 15 years ago, and he went, Oscar, I want you to blah, blah, blah. It's like, I know the perfect person for this problem. Describe the problem. He said, yeah, you said that better than I could. And I made a referral, and that person was perfect for them. I wasn't qualified to do what they want. Yet this stream of referrals comes from Chris in Singapore. That's like, hey, Oscar's really clear on what he doesn't do. He knows what he knows, but boy, he can understand your problem. So even if he can't help you, he'll refer you to the right person. And in that context, as sellers, our job is to solve their problem, not sell our solution. Now, if we're lucky, those two map together. And in this case, you double the productivity of this seller from 2 to 4. In our research database, we have 4 primary listening barriers, and you just described one of them, which is the shrewd listening villain. These are people who are anticipating problems before the person's finished even saying. Not only are they anticipating the problem, they're jumping ahead and going, I know what the implementation path, I know the 3 things I need to sell them after that, but you're not actually listening to their real problem because you're jumping ahead. What the speaker says in our research is they are not listening to me, they are trying to fix me. So it's got nothing to do with the problem. They feel like you're imposing something on them. So there's 4 primary listening barriers. We call them the listening villains: the dramatic listener, the lost listener, the interrupting listener, and the shrewd listener. And those show up in our database in quite a even distribution. And if we want to pick that up for another episode on listening, I'm happy to do a double click and a deep dive on
Love
that.
Yeah.
So back to the selling scenario, this is extraordinarily common, not just in sales. This is common in any internal support function, internal legal, internal HR, internal IT, internal finance, internal customer service. Anybody who's trying to help typically jumps into solution much quicker because they want to pick something off the shelf and just put it in place for them. Unfortunately, until they fully describe the problem, and most times when people describe the problem, they're describing the problem from their perspective. In organizations, you need to explore their perspective, how that interacts with their system, and their customers' perspective as well, which is often something that's missed. And then finally, you need to listen for the business case, which means you're competing not just against your natural competition, but you're also competing against how many toilet rolls the organization buys as well, because the capital in an organization can go there or it can go to your solution. So you might beat the competition and still not get the deal because you haven't listened effectively to the business case.
Love it. Love it. Love
Wow.
it.
That's
Well,
some good stuff right there.
yeah, right. Yeah, I love it. That's a great place to end. Yes, we definitely would love to have you back on. I think that this is just such a great topic. And as you've identified, we've only had three podcasts about it. And it's just so important. You know, you wrote the book, How to Listen. I'm assuming that's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all that.
Wherever good books are sold.
There you go.
Yes.
Oscar, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Please don't. Get in touch with your own listening. Visit listeningquiz.com. Take the 7-minute assessment, discover what the 4 barriers to your listening are, in what order, and then we give you a tailored report with 3 very practical tips, some of them you may have heard today, about what to do when it comes to getting in the way. So listeningquiz.com, and then if you want to connect with me, you'll have a document that'll explain how to do that as well.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, again, Oscar, thank you so much for being on the show. We just really enjoyed this conversation. To all our listeners, we thank you as always. Jen and I love getting the emails and love the questions that you send us. So please keep those going. It helps encourage us to know that there's some insight and that you're listening and that you want to hear different things. So thank you for that. We appreciate that. Until the next time, folks, stay safe and be healthy.